Network Service of the NTA. Keep a date with us. The Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies has, for 40 years now, remained Nigeria's foremost and apex research institute when it comes to judiciary and legal matters. This institute has made a series of impacts in research for Nigeria. And while its impact may not be known to the ordinary man on the street, the major consumers of the product of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies are not in any doubt that this institute has met its mandate. But how ready is the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies to meet up with the fast and new emerging areas of law? How ready is it to complete the job that the government has given to it in terms of putting Nigeria abreast of the legal challenges that are numerous in the various areas of governance? These and more others are part of the things that we shall be looking at, particularly now that the federal government has just appointed a new Director General for the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Welcome to The Scale. I am Femi Okeowo. Professor Mohammed Taufik Ladan, a professor of law from the Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, was recently appointed the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. For a very vast man like Professor Taufik Ladan, one should expect that he would have a vision for the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Of course, there is also a statutory vision that the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies has to shoulder. And so, how ready is Professor Taufik Ladan himself as a person and the Institute in championing the cause of advancing legal research in Nigeria? The Scale went to visit Professor Ladan to hear and see what he has for Nigeria in terms of a vision for the research institute that caters for law in Nigeria. Join us on this segment of The Scale for this interview. What are your thoughts about the relevance of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies in legal studies generally in Nigeria?
It was established by law purposely to serve as the apex legal research and training institute in Nigeria on all legal matters and to service all organs of government and also all MDAs. With particular focus also on developing postgraduate programs in emerging fields of law to guide law faculties on PG programs, on postgraduate programs. So the founding fathers of the institute did their own best to position the institute 40 years ago in the context that it will be of relevance, to serve the nation, within their understanding and also in the circumstances in which the institute took off. So that gave us the vision to have a space, an academic and administrative headquarters all in Lagos, located within the University of Lagos campus, Akoka. in the last actually 20 years, or let me say even the last 15 years to be precise, a need was actually felt by my predecessors that Abuja is becoming the attraction, and if you want to extend the service, of the institute in terms of APEX legal research and training, then you also have to be in Abuja. So administrative headquarters 20 years ago precisely, out of the 40 years of the institute in Lagos, moved practically to Abuja. And we're very lucky as an institute that we may be having the Attorney General and Minister of Justice as the supervisory minister of the institute. But the chairman of the governing council has always been whoever is the Chief Justice of Nigeria, chairs the governing council of the institute.
I don't want to break your thoughts,
yes,
but what is the rationale behind that?
I mean, it has to do with the founding fathers' vision to place the institute truly as an independent legal research institute for the service of all. So we are in the middle of all the three organs of government. And then we have a clause in the Institute Act that says we should also provide guidance on postgraduate matters to all law faculties in Nigeria, both federal, state, and private universities, in Nigeria. So you can see we have the supervisory minister being from the executive arm of government, the Attorney General, Minister of Justice. The chairman of the governing council is the head of the judiciary, Chief Justice of Nigeria. And then legal research and training includes we servicing the lawmakers, another arm of government, yes, because what they do is lawmaking. And in the lawmaking process, our services are needed, yes, because we are supposed to help them in drafting bills, our motions, legal issue brief, lead debate, and all this, and they do even legal research for them. Okay. For instance, people need to understand why are we amending a particular instrument of 5, 10, 20, 30 years old. Why? And you need a legal research to provide the justification and also to provide the review of the relevant clauses that can actually provide this kind of platform. So in essence, the institute is very relevant because it is meant to provide legal services and training on particularly emerging fields of law, for the benefit of Nigerians and also in the best interest of the nation.
Have the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies moved well enough with these emerging areas?
Each and every institution of a national character of our institute needs to really move in phases in life. So the truth of the matter actually is that in the last 40 years, the institute has actually moved from traditional law courses, because we're not supposed to compete with law faculties in universities. We are supposed to even be providing guidance and template on how they can do better and qualitative research at the law faculties level. That's our job. Now, so the institute, in fairness to my predecessors, have actually moved away strategically and in phases from traditional law courses in terms of development of templates, extensive research work, publications, conduct of public lecture series for enlightenment purposes, and also providing implementation guidelines and regulations of existing principal instruments that will actually make stakeholders from the judiciary and also from the bar and also from the academia to really understand their critical roles in all these actually phases. So some of the emerging fields that the institute have actually developed, particularly in the last 15 years, include intellectual property law. Okay. Very important. And then we have specialized training programs in practice and procedure, all right, which is very, very important. Alternative dispute resolution is one area that the institute has also mounted certificate programs, on mediation, on arbitration, and on general ADR. And it's selling because a number of government legal advisors are keen into it to get this knowledge in these new fields of law, which were never taught to many of them at the university level. That is what we are supposed to be doing. That's what we are doing so far. Regional economic integration law and practice is the vogue today because countries cannot survive on their own in global trade and investment. They cannot. They need to integrate either at the sub-regional level or at the continental level before they can actually really make an impact and even survive, the global trade and global regime. If sophisticated countries of 27 could form European Union, have European Court of Justice, European Court of Human Rights, they have European Parliament, how much more, and these are actually our colonizers, how much more of those that were colonized and were developing nations, some of us are even underdeveloped. So the truth of the matter actually is that we have the demand to mount emerging fields of law that were never covered, in the last, 5, 6, 7, up to 15 years backward. So, I intend to add value by upgrading what we have, in the next 4 years. And one of the strategies is first to get us an affiliation with, one of the universities, so that our PhD programs, masters and PhD program that we are running can get actually approval of the NUC. That's one. The second strategy is to mount new and emerging actually fields of law. Regional economic integration and practice is one, where we have in Abuja alone, 3 ECOWAS organs that have over 150 staff. Legal officers alone in the 3 actually, including non-legal officers. Then we have Ministry of Justice staff across the federation, and then we have also Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They have a whole unit on ECOWAS unit, and with an ambassador as the head of ECOWAS. So the staff also need knowledge and understanding of our treaty obligations and our regional economic integration law and practice on a comparative basis. So this is one. Then sustainable development law and practice is another emerging field. It's not taught anywhere. And this is also one emerging field of law that we are actually mounting, both in terms of specialized training programs and also at master's and PhD level. It's very important for us because both at the global, regional, continental, and national level, 75 to 80% of every country's national budget is going into the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And for us in Nigeria, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, from my research that I've done for UN agencies, in the last 5 years, shows clearly that they are already, part of our fundamental objectives and Directive of State Policy, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of Nigeria. But we never realized that they were actually going to be elements of SDGs to be promoted at the global level, which requires national commitment to key in terms of budgetary, commitment, and also political will to drive, because every right to food, right to water, right to education that you provide is already in the constitutional objectives on the Directive of State Policy. So our job as an Apex Legal Research and Training Institute, is to look at also areas like electricity law and policy. And this is an emerging field, in addition to the broader energy law and policy, field. And quite a number of actually people in the private sector, in the private bar and in academia and also the bench, and even the National Assembly. They need the services, of the Institute to understand these emerging fields, because we have house committees on practically all the emerging fields that we're talking about. So they need a think tank body that can not just be training them, which they have already, as an arm of the National Assembly, but to do legal research, to guide them, and add value to their work. That is primarily the responsibility of the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies by law.
How well is now patronized by government, particularly when government needs a think tank to do a number of business deals? I don't want to refer particularly to the oil contract between Nigeria and the P and ID, But such things, how well is NILS patronized by government?
To be frank with you, this is one deficit, area or gap in our relationship with all the three arms of government. We've not strategically placed ourselves. We've not reached out. So in the last 40 days, I changed the strategy. That look, you have to strategically present yourself to tell people by law what you are supposed to do for them and what you can do, and what they should expect from you. That's it. So I've been presenting the case of NILS. I've been going around on courtesy visits and I've been well received. And amazingly, people were surprised that, so do we have an institution that is ever ready to do this kind of things, even on pro bono basis, free of charge, without charging a fee, because we are already established by law and being paid to do that. But if you give us a consultancy, we also have within the law the power to accept the gift, to borrow, blah, 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 and then those kind of things. But the truth of the matter actually is that we've not been strategically visible. That's one truth that I found out. And so part of the repositioning of the institute was for me to be going around, and it's really yielding actually positive result. I have currently under my administration about 317 staff, Lagos and Abuja combined. Lagos is our academic headquarters, Abuja is our administrative headquarters. Okay, so we are lucky, we are actually accommodated for 40 years at the University of Lagos, and then in Abuja, we are lucky, the chairman of the governing council is whoever is the Chief Justice of Nigeria, accommodated also in the Supreme Court for free. Yeah. So we have 317 staff, 69 research officers with masters and PhD, and 14 professors of law, and about 5 senior advocates of Nigeria. Wow. There is no institution that you are looking for human resource, that can add value to the work of any organ or institution of government that, in terms of law, that is missing in the institute. Okay. So, for emerging fields, for next year, we are actually mapping the ones that are on demand. About 5 of them, that we intend actually to promote, and we are working with different, institutions, including international organizations, to partner, on these matters. And then we also have already MOUs with internationally, reputed agencies like Makata Foundation. We are working on 3 components, program. And I can tell you, they are in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they chose us to partner on this issue. And our target group are the Federal High Court and State High Courts, and then we are rolling down 2020 to 2022 down to some state governments.
Yes, we have used this segment to look ahead and see what Nigeria can benefit from a major research institute that was deliberately created to enhance governance and enhance the law in Nigeria. Now we move to another group of people who help to enhance prosecution in Nigeria. These are the class of people you call the Law Officers Association of Nigeria. Indeed, they are law officers, that is, lawyers that are attached to every ministry of justice in Nigeria. We have featured them once a while on this program, and recently that association had its annual conference in Abuja. And so we decided to pick from what the Law Officers Association of Nigeria are doing to help enhance prosecution from the various ministries of justice, going from the Federal Ministry of Justice to the state ministries of justice. So let's hear and see what they have in stock for Nigerians in this very, very crucial part of governance.
The conference noted with concern the state of insecurity in the nation and condemned the wanton destruction of lives and properties orchestrated by terrorists, herdsmen, kidnappers, bandits, armed robbers, and the likes in the nation, and call on the federal government and security agencies to put in place measures to stamp out these anomalies. The conference received with shock the news of the kidnapping of Honorable Justice Chioma Nwosu Ihime, PhD, Justice of the Court of Appeal, and Honorable Justice Abdul Dogo of the Federal High Court, which was recently released by his captors. The conference therefore called upon the federal government to put every security apparatus in motion to ensure the immediate release of the Justice of the Court of Appeal, who is still in captivity. And we are reliably informed there is another Justice of the Judiciary from Nasarawa State. The conference also holds in its heart out to the family of the slain police orderly, to Honorable Justice Chioma Nwosu Ihime, PhD, who was gruesomely murdered by the kidnappers of the said justice. The conference urged all Nigerians to be security conscious and proactive through timeous report of security threats and breaches to the appropriate security agencies. Independence of the judiciary. The conference encouraged other arms of government to give the judiciary free hand and the needed independence to carry out her constitutional responsibilities without fear or favor. Welfare of law officers. The conference called on both federal and state governments to take action and assign security protection to law officers, as well as security allowances as is obtainable in other climes. The conference observed that crime could not be fought successfully without adequate safety and protection of law officers, judges, and magistrates. The conference observed with dismay that some states do not sponsor law officers to conferences and thereby leaving the burden of payment of practicing fees on them to bear. It consequently urged both the federal and state governments to respectively ensure the payment of the stated fees for their respective law officers. Long calls on the attorneys general and solicitor generals of the federation and state to demand an enhanced budgetary allocation of federal and state ministries of justice and wire packages for law officers. Loan reiterates her demands for the payment and upward review of hazard, robin, books, journals, research, and other necessary allowances to law officers to meet with the Herculean challenges of their jobs. Loan urged that funds being expended on farming out of cases should be paid into the ministries of justice post for proper funding of government cases handled by law officers. Loan urged the federal and state governments to take urgent steps to insulate law officers from political interferences in the course of their duties and ensure that promotion and recognition are given to law officers to encourage hard work, competence, and integrity. Conferment of censorship of directors of public prosecutions, DPP, directors of civil litigation, DCL, and solicitors general, permanent secretary, SGF, PS. The conference commended the Legal Practitioners Privileges Committee, LPPC, for the conferment of the rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria on the Solicitor General and Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Justice, Mr. Dayo Apata, SAN, Solicitor General and Permanent Secretary of Justice, Katsina State and Edo State respectively, and a law officer in the Federal Ministry of Justice, Opoko, and urge them to extend such gestures to other law officers in the Federal and State Ministry of Justice in Nigeria who have distinguished themselves in the practice of law.
That's so much we have on the scale of justice today, but then it doesn't exhaust the issues that are around us. You can expect that in the days to come, we shall be unveiling very many areas of law that needs to be extracted for your benefit. Thank you for being part of today's program, and we shall be seeing you again.
someone who is a Christian is someone who lives a life of Jesus Christ. And the life of Jesus Christ is a life of sacrifice.
Yes.
Thank you for tuning in. I am Lydia Odije Ochi.
Iglesias for Deadline 360.
In Kano, Fatima Sanusi Karaye, Deadline 360.
The closest system of government to the people over the years, observers say, has been involved in several.
The Gbagi Adorable Marriage Festival remains a sacred obligation.
For Deadline 360, Justina Etam. Efik language, otherwise known as Iko Efik, is a native language of.
Thank you for joining us. I am Lydia Odije Ochi.
Welcome to Abuja, the place that unites Nigeria.
Federal government reiterates commitment to financing Nigeria's immunization obligations.
Senate to invite Interior Minister over federal government's visa on arrival policy for Africans.
House of Representatives rejects constitutional amendment bill seeking single term of 6 years for presidents and governors in Nigeria.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the 2020 Appropriation Act.
Well, the top item trending on the news since yesterday up until now in the country is the signing of the 2020 appropriation bill into law by President Muhammadu Buhari. The budget, which was presented to the joint session of the National Assembly on the 8th of October, was passed by the House of Representatives on the 5th of December, and that's exactly 1 month and 27 days after it was presented to by Mr. President.
Well, Rosa, this indeed is a work of development. And although the 10.5 trillion naira budget is now well over 260 billion naira, higher than the initial estimate presented by the President of the National Assembly. One significant fact is that the 9th National Assembly has, as it were, now overcome the trend of budget delays that had been the country's experience, most especially for most of the 20-year period that we have had return to democracy.
Now, President Buhari, in his speech during the signing of the budget into law yesterday, reminded Nigerians that it's been 20 years since the return to democracy. The passage of the appropriation bill makes it the 4th time that the federal budget has been passed before the end of the previous year, and this being, of course, the earliest passed so far.
Well, I believe that in terms of delays regarding the appropriation bill eventually becoming an act, was experienced in 2018. That's to say the 2018 budget, which got to the National Assembly as a bill on the 7th of November 2017, but wasn't passed until the 16th of May of 2018 and was eventually signed into law on the 20th of June. That took about 6 months and 8 days before it became law.
Well, Kingsley, the truth is that this morning we're basically looking at, of course, the early passage of the budget and, of course, what it entails, the significance of this and, of course, execution, which is always a challenge that we have in terms of monitoring budgets when it's passed.
That's right. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we now have a piece of legislation with regard to the appropriation for the federal government for fiscal year 2020. But it's significant because the clamor had always been for a return to the January to December budgetary cycle, which unfortunately we had missed most of the time since the return to democracy in 1999. The president, of course, reminded Nigerians while he was appending his signature to the appropriation bill yesterday that the bill, of course, which is now a law, is certainly one that will be a lot of interesting goodies for Nigerians.
Of course, and immediately, he directed that all ministries and departments, of course, should ensure that they implement this and work with it as soon as possible.
Well, that's right. The numbers in the budget are already very well known. This is with regard to what has been voted for recurrent and also what has been voted for capital expenditure, plus, of course, debt servicing and the deficit that is also in the budget. Reliance on crude oil production of 2.1 million barrels per day, an exchange rate of 305 naira to the US dollar, plus, of course, an expected growth of the GDP and inflationary pressure, all of the numbers that our guests later in our conversation segment will be examining, along with, of course, the matters that are pertinent in the finance bill that's supposed to be a critical component of the budgetary and fiscal issues that will have to be taken into consideration when the year commences on the 1st of January.
All right, so just as Kingsley said, we have guests who will be joining us in the program much later, and of course they'll be speaking significantly to the impact of this early signing of the appropriation bill, and of course the impact it would have on the economy, of course returning to the January-December cycle, how important it is and what impact it will have. I'm Rhoda Anonim. That's how we welcome you to another beautiful Wednesday morning edition of Good Morning Nigeria. We're broadcasting live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority from our studios here in Abuja. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Kingsley Sadolo. I join my colleague Rhoda and also welcome you to the program, because of which we have our regular complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, and others. At the time, let's take the highlights of the morning news with our other colleague, Comfort Amodo. Good morning, Comfort.
Good morning, Kingsley and Rhoda, and good morning, Nigeria. Here's the morning news highlights, rather. The federal government says it remains committed and focused on finding sustainable ways of financing Nigerians' immunization and vaccination obligations. President Muhammadu Buhari gave the assurance while receiving in audience members of the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. The president also welcomed Hyundai Company's proposal to set up assembly plants in Nigeria. The Buhari Media Organization has described the quick passage of the 2020 budget proposal by the National Assembly and subsequent consent by President Muhammadu Buhari as an indication of the progressive leadership evolving under the present administration. The media organization, in a statement signed by its Chairman Nii Akinseju says the development will bring about a lot of gains for the country from both within and outside Nigeria, expecting that development partners will align their projects, plans and programs with the new budget cycle. The group also noted that in some aspects of the budget where there were additions or subtractions, while the legislators were meant to add value and complement the work of the executive with a view to achieving the intended goals for the benefit of all Nigerians. The Senate has resolved to invite the Minister of Interior to appear before its committees on Interior, Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters to give briefing on the logistics and conditions for the implementation of the visa on arrival policy of the federal government. The Senate also received requests from President Muhammadu Buhari for the confirmation of the chairman and commissioners of the National Assembly Service Commission.
Nigeria without visa requires compliance with Section 12 of the 1999 Constitution. We domesticate it so that the do's and don'ts and cross the I's and dot the I's and cross the T's. Other countries are doing it and they are gaining a lot in terms of business influence in that country.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has rejected a bill seeking to amend the Constitution to provide a single term of 6 years for the President and governors. The bill, sponsored by John Deere, failed to make it through second reading as it could not secure the support of lawmakers.
Were it not for the opportunity of second term, most of the people that occupied executive offices would have operated with impunity from day one to the end.
The proposed amendment is self-seeking. As members of the legislative arm and as serving members, we cannot come here and amend the bill to suit ourselves.
The question now is that those in favor of the bill be read second time, say aye. Those against say nay. The nays have it.
The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning has launched an electronic records management platform for the tracking of incoming and outgoing mails and letters from and to the ministry. Minister Zainab Ahmed says the initiative was born out of the present administration desire to enhance efficiency and effectiveness in service delivery, promotion of interagency synergy, as well as the fight against corruption.
A paperless ministry with an end-to-end automation of all administrative processes.
All is now moving to what we call artificial intelligence. The human intelligence are being gradually fade off. Everything must be electronic so that at the end of the day, at the fingertip, you can get the information that one wants it.
Citizens have been asked to take advantage of various platforms created by the federal government to ask questions, contribute and make constructive criticisms. This will make them benefit from the dividends of democracy. Director General, Bureau of Public Service Reforms, Ibrahim Suki Arabi said this at a workshop on citizens' engagement on good governance.
Community, you are aware that Mr. President recently signed the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement to ensure the market is open up for the private sector groups in Africa continent to enhance the livelihood of citizens, especially non-state actors, through increased productivity, income and business relationships across the border.
And those are the news highlights. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly with Rhoda and Kinsley in a moment.
Years ago, a scout was looking around Bayelsa. Luckily for me, came to my school, and that was how my journey of becoming a Nestle Milo basketball championship MVP began. Along the path, some people tried to discourage me because I was short, but then I got to realize that it's about your heart, not about your height. Sometimes I get discouraged going for training and all that. Sometimes I trek, and that is what every person that knows where he or she is going has to do, to play along with the challenges and make sure you overcome it. I am grateful for the platform Nestle is giving to young athletes me. My name is Regina Donanu, and this is my journey.
Nestle, good food, good life. Nutritious. Delicious. Original. It's for me and you. I love my everybody. Join me. Everywhere I go, everybody testify. I love my extraordinary.
Now, download the exciting new Indomitables game on Google Play Store.
20 years of travel and cutting. 20 years of promoting tourism in Africa and diaspora. Over 3 million kilometers traveled. Over 30 African countries visited. Explored the diaspora in 4 continents. Connected over 100,000 happy tourists to Africa. Reached over 50 million homes. Igniting smiles across Africa and beyond. As Goge Africa turns 20, we thank you and invite you to join us in the quest for 20 must-visit destinations in partnership with the largest TV network in Africa, the NTA, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Transportation, Studio 24, Delta Airline, Toll Brokers International. You too can still be a partner. Call the numbers on your screen or info@gogeafrica.tv. Goge Africa, celebrating 2 decades of heritage, travel and tourism.
Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures. Just calm down for a moment, please. Do you have a job where you go to? No, but someone is arranging, Listen. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alito, it's better to be home than be trapped abroad, or even end up in prison.
My name is Yato Adeza Adams, the General Manager, Corporate and Strategic Communications, Nigerian Port Authority. As regards the land borders closure, available statistical data from APMT, which is one of our terminal operators that is involved in container handling terminal, has recorded an increase of commodity use of cargoes into their terminal as a result of cargo diversion from the vessels originally meant for neighboring countries. That shows you that the terminal operators are going to have an increase in revenue, which is accrued to the terminal, and at the same time, Nigerian Port Authority will equally benefit from the revenue increase. So that is the benefit we have derived from the border closure.
Welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the NTA. Now to one of our complimentary segments, that's the business. Nigeria's inflation rises to its highest level since May 2018. Let's join Akule Adeye for more details.
The rate rose to 11.85% in November, which is the highest since May 2018. A report by the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, increased by 11.85% year-on-year in November 2019. This is 0.24% points higher than the 11.1% rate recorded in October 2019. Composite Food Index went up by 14.48% in November 2019 as against 14.09% in October 2019. The rise in food index is attributed to increase in prices of bread, cereals, oil, and tubers. And the equities market on Tuesday closed on a positive note as Nigeria Stock Exchange or share index appreciated by plus 0.60% to close at 26,695.18 points as against minus 0.13% depreciation recorded previously. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Many thanks, Kunle, for the business package. Next for us is the newspaper review.
To our and it's just Kogi seeks a single term for president's directives
by the government to 2 reasons prohibited by civil aviation regulations. Also at the court, the Federal High Court in Abuja has ordered the Director General of the Department of State Services as well as Attorney General of the Federation to appear in court December 23rd to explain why Omoyele Sowore granted bail on November 6th and given ultimatum on December 5th and released on December 5th was rearrested on December 6th. This followed an ex-party motion filed by his counsel, Marshal Abubakar, on behalf of Mr. Sowore. Justice Inyang Eko that he has to hear those other parties before he gives his position. Meanwhile, former governor of Abia State, Ojuzo Kalu, has filed and seeking a bail on grounds of Section 241 of the Constitution, as well as the post-judgment jurisdiction of Section 6 of the Constitution. Other conditions for bail is to enable Mr. Kalu attend to his health condition, and also as a senator, he needs to carry out his official functions at the National Assembly. Prosecution argued that the criminal jurisprudence can handle any appeal and therefore he does not require to be set free from the custody of the correctional services. They cited the case of Joshua Dari and the Ikoyi prison. Mr. Kalu is sentenced to 12 years in prison and he has since been in the custody of the Correctional Institute since December 23rd.
Okay.
December.
Since December 5th. The case is to be heard on December 23rd.
Okay, I just want us to correct that. He said December 23rd.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust stories on the front page, particularly the same as those that we've read from the other two titles, but there are a few others that we'll take. So from the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. It says reps, that's another story. Reps reject 6-year single term for president, governors and legislatures, page 3. Court declines order restraining Ganduje from dethroning emirs, that's page 4. 2023, I'll stop desperate politicians, according to Buhari, and with a rider what the president should do to succeed, according to experts. And right at the foot of the front page, 2 customs officers killed, 1 injured. Inflation increased by, no, that's not correct. Now it's saying that inflation increased by 11.85% in November. No, I think that should be inflation rises too. Because if you say increased by 11.5%, you have to add it to the preceding figure, and that's going to, yes, that's, yeah. So it's inflation rises to 11.85% in November, according to the Bureau of Statistics. Pupils suffer over absence of teachers in FCE communities, page 25. Bye.
All right, bye. Let me quickly take the editorial so you take that alongside. And editorial this morning is on the blueprint and it's titled Tackling tackling public sector corruption. President Muhammadu Buhari said lamentation that corruption in the public sector is hampering the ability of government to deliver services to the people, and underscores the dire need for hands to be on deck in order to fight the cankerworm to finish. The president therefore called on the National Assembly to fast-track the passage of the Special Crimes Court Bill. This was while he was speaking at the opening of a two-day summit for top-level on diminishing trade to the government of the Federation.
Express train before the end of the year. The train services on the narrow gauge was stopped September 30th due to the construction of the broader gauge, the standard gauge from Lagos to Ibadan. The services will be restored, and it will go a long way in easing some of the transportation problem across the country. The Nigerian Railway will do well to also restore the Eastern Link, the one from Port Harcourt that come across sometimes to Jos, to Maiduguri, and it will go a long way in easing the economic problems of the country. The editorial is based on the president's remark to a conference of the ICPC at the state advent of transparency accounting services. And he inspired the IPPIS and agencies must refer to as part of the factor to restore economic probity, especially as far as group resources are concerned. The Academic Staff Union of Nigeria Universities is still challenging its resort to the IPPIS, and the editorial is saying that on that occasion, the president also drew attention to about 1 trillion that has been spent on constituency project, and nothing has been shown for it, and therefore challenged all the corrupt agencies, ICPC, EFCC, to double their effort to ensure that public resources are preserved and being stopped from being frittered away. He said there's a need for them to deal a blow to corruption.
Okay, Bayo, incidentally, because the incident occurred last weekend, we didn't have the opportunity of at least mentioning it, if not discussing it briefly, in our newspaper review segment. I'm talking about the passing of Philip Osondu. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you recall Philip Osondu was Nigeria's sensation at the Under-16 World Cup that took place in Canada in 1987. He was said to have passed on in Belgium at the age of 48. We've lost quite a number of Nigerians in Belgium. Osaro Ababafo, one of the best midfielders we had in his generation, also passed away many years ago in Belgium. So Philip Osondu, as you remember, of course, were on the sports desk at the time. It was a great sensation.
Yes, in 1987, Philip Osondu was a sensation. It was the first time FIFA was featuring the Under-17 match. In fact, at that time, they call it, there's a name they called
Kodak Under-16 or something.
It was Kodak Under-17, yes. But they had another name for it. I can't readily remember. It was the group of Osondu that attracted Nigerian mothers to football. That's right. Because they watched as these young boys fought and struggled, and eventually they didn't win the gold, but they won silver. He later on was part of the Dammam team. The
Miracle of Dammam.
Yes, he was part of the Dammam team, and they won silver from Saudi Arabia. Fortunately, he had his career in Belgium, and all of a sudden he died at the age of 34.
No, 48.
Is it 48 now?
48, yes.
Okay, 48.
48, yes.
All right.
Philip Osondu, he was acrobatic. If you recall,
very sensational.
Yes, all those who watched it at the time. But for the younger generation, they might have the opportunity of seeing that video clips from that moment. Why are you smiling at me, Rhoda?
One other thing. During the 87 under-17 match, many Nigerians, especially mothers, reported with high blood pressure because they watched that match and they were so attached and the loss affected many of them. So,
it was.
Are you trying to say...
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying it. Let's thank Bayo and listen for today.
All right, Bayo, thank you very much.
Thank you for dismissing me.
We'll see you again tomorrow morning.
Bayo too.
All right, see if you just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a break now. When we return, of course, we'll be looking at the 2020 appropriation law, which was came into effect yesterday after President Muhammadu Buhari signed it, and we have guests in the studio to speak extensively on this, so you don't want to miss that. Stay with us.
Swore an oath to serve our fatherland and defend the people that traded their freedom, comfortable homes and mortgaged lives on the battleground for our unity and peaceful living. These are the great, fearless, loyal and committed Nigerian armed forces who risked their lives courageously to safeguard our borders. But in the line of duty, many never returned. Nigerians, arise, let's celebrate our fallen heroes. On the remembrance emblem with pride to support the incapacitated and families of our fallen heroes.
It is indeed befitting to honor the memory of the gallant hearts of the men who paid the sacrifice to keep the united.
President Muhammadu Buhari enjoins all ministries, parastatal, religious and corporate bodies to donate generously to the Emblem Appeal Launch. Send your donations to these accounts. Account name, Emblem Appeal Launch. Account number 393-200-7526. EcoBank Nigeria PLC.
Years ago, a scout was looking around Bayelsa. Luckily for me, he came to my school, and that was my journey of becoming the Milo Basketball Championship MVP began. Along the path, some people tried to discourage me because I was short, but then I got to realize that it's about your heart, not about your height. Sometimes I get discouraged going for training and all that. Sometimes I trek, and that is what every person that knows where he or she is going has to do, to play along with the challenges and make sure you overcome it. I am grateful for the platform Nestle is giving to young athletes like me. My name is Regina Donanu, and this is my journey.
Nestle, good food, good life.
The dreamer, the stylish, meet the bold, meet the inquisitive, meet the warrior, meet the master, meet the realist. The challenge is coming. Challenge. Power, development, and peace. Coming soon.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We're live here in our studios in Abuja, and of course our conversation segment now is on the 2020 appropriation law, which came into effect after it was signed yesterday by President Muhammadu Buhari. To set the tone for our discussion this morning, here is a report from the State House and by our State House correspondent at Musambo on the signing that will lay the foundation for our discussion. Of course, our guests are already sitting.
Flanked by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, Senate President Ahmed Lawan, Speaker Femi Gbajabiamila, amongst others, President Muhammadu Buhari appends his signature, giving the go-ahead for the implementation of the 2020 budget. A significant and historic event was indeed a promise kept by both the Executive and the National Assembly to return Nigeria to a predictable budget cycle.
I'm very pleased that the National Assembly worked uncommonly long hours in the interest of our people and the national economy to ensure detailed legislative review and passage of the budget within 2 months. I equally thank the National Assembly for supporting important legislations such as the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Amendments Act and the 2019 Finance Bill. These laws are vital to the successful implementation of the 2020 budget. Now, we are well positioned to effectively implement the budget and deliver our promises to Nigerians.
President Muhammadu Buhari described as welcoming the renewed partnership and mutual understanding between the executive and the legislature, saying this harmonious working relationship should not only be sustained but be made the norm. He directed that efforts be made towards ensuring the presentation of the 2021 appropriation bill to the National Assembly by September 2020.
We work with the 9th National Assembly to give effect to the constitutional, legislative, and other actions that may be necessary to address the various challenges currently associated with our federal budgeting process, including the enactment of an organic budget bill.
The 2020 budget has an increase of 263.95 billion naira over the executive proposal submitted in October this year.
We have examined the adjustments and may revert to the National Assembly with a request for amendment or other relevant amendments. With today's global oil market outlook and our strategic approach to revenue growth, we are optimistic that we will be able to finance the 2020 budget.
Details of the approved budget will be made public by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning in the coming days.
Everybody understands the implication of having a budget that is predictable. That tells you that our economy is going to receive a boost, an injection that will see more businesses, more employment opportunities. And of course, we also believe that this is one process that will also support the private sector so well.
There's a synergy between the executive and the legislature like never before. Many are want to criticize that. We believe that we will continue to do what we need to do as a legislature, and the executive will do what they're doing. And the harmony that is between the two, guess what benefits? It's not us, it's not the executive, it's the Nigerian people.
All right, with us here in the studios to discuss matters arising from the signing into law of the Appropriation Bill 2020, we'd like to welcome distinguished Senator Jibrin Barau, who is chairman of the Senate Committee on Appropriations.
Good morning.
Pleasure to have you on.
Good morning. Good morning.
Also here with us in the studios is Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who is spokesman for the House of Representatives and also chairman of the House Committee on Media and Public Affairs. Pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and viewers, thank you for tuning in.
All right.
And also with us in Abuja is Ni Akinsiju. He's an economic and investment analyst. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much. Good morning.
We're being joined from our Kanu studios by Garba Ibrahim Sheka. He's a professor of economics from Bayero University. And thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigeria. Hello, good morning. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Sheka. Quite a while, and happily that you are back with us from our Kano Network Center. But we'll come to you, of course, in the course of the conversation. Let's begin, as the saying goes, charity beginning at home, with our guest here, Senator Barau, who is chair of the Appropriations Committee. We recall we had you on Group Nigeria shortly after the passage of the bill by the two chambers. Now, the President has given his assent. The budget or appropriation is not taking effect yet until the 1st of January 2020. We need to indicate that. So, this has happened. What is the big deal about it?
Well, this is a very important milestone for this country because we are going to return the budget cycle, or it has been returned from January to December every year. It will help the entire nation, the government, agencies, and the private enterprises, because it will allow for government to be able to plan its activities, taking into consideration natural factors like the weather, rainy season, dry season, and so on and so forth. And it will give the room needed for proper implementation. And when you go to businesses, it gives businesses the latitude or the space to calculate their opportunities and risks and ways to mitigate the risks and ways to gain from those opportunities, to utilize those opportunities. So that uncertainty that was existing in terms of the lack of known budget cycle, because sometimes before you could see budget cycle beginning from February, sometime June, sometime July, which is not in consonant with what is happening elsewhere, worldwide. So this is a very, very good arrangement. It will be good for the entire nation. It will be good for everyone. So it is a welcome development.
Okay, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, what does this mean?
It means a lot to the Federal Republic of Nigeria because the past 20 years, we've only been able to achieve this twice. That was in 2001 and in 2007. The one of 2001 was done in December 2000, and the one of 2007 was in 2006 December. And this is a major event in Nigeria because, like the senator said, it helps the economy to have focus. And it is also in conformity with the provision of the Constitution. Many wonder, why are we struggling, why are we jubilating that this budget cycle has been changed to the January-December calendar? Many are not aware that the provisions of Section 80, 81, 82 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, when purposively interpreted, maintained that budget cycle should be January to December, because in Section 318 under our Chapter 4 of the Constitution define what is a financial year. And it says it is a period of 12 months from 1st of January to 31st of December, or any other period as assigned by the National Assembly. And when budgets are not passed on time or implemented on time, like I said in this program before, statistics have shown that a delay of 100 days depresses the economy by 2.5%. Because when government expenditure is released into the economy, it activates even GDP, of the country. So it is a very relevant, very significant event that's taking place in Nigeria, and we ought to celebrate the National Assembly as well as the executive. The willingness, the political will to have this done, if it was only residing with the executive, it would not be achieved. It was only the will of the National Assembly, it would not be achieved. Yes, the National Assembly, through the House of Rep that I speak for, represented this in our legislative agenda. On page 72, section 215 of our legislative agenda spoke, maintained that there should be a national budget reform in this ninth assembly. We have practiced what we have preached, and that reforming has to do with the time. And the timing is to enable, like the distinguished senator said, time for implementation. What then follows is, how are we going to monitor to see that this trickles down to the benefit of all Nigerians who are, on the street of Nigeria?
Honorable Benjamin Kalu, all of that we'll be speaking to, of course, in the course of this program. Let's bring in Niyi Akinseju. Niyi Akinseju, let's get your take on this.
I will just piggyback on the submissions of the distinguished and the honorable here. And I personally am excited. I have been a major advocate of a return to a predictable January to December cycle. And that is in the context of the fact that there is a difference between a fiscal year and a calendar year of spending and income. What we have been experiencing over the years mostly is what I describe as calendar year of spending and income. A fiscal year must be properly and appropriately defined with specific goals for each quarter of that year. And that is why we can now say we have a 12-month financial year. That was translates to fiscal year. And beyond that, because if you read the trend, there's a tendency for sub-nationals to also align with what the federal government do. So I expect that since this is achieved, the states, the subnationals will also trend towards that. So you start seeing an alignment, at the federal to the state, and of course it trickles also to the private sector, and it tells you of a consolidation, a consolidation of fiscal activities, and nothing can be more impactful because you are seeing a coordinated activity both from the public sector and the private sector. When you have that, it will naturally impact the Nigerian, So if we are talking of capital, for instance, we're also going to see for the first time in many years an alignment between activation and implementation of capital budget and recurrent budget. We've always had recurrent on its own, capital on its own, and it makes it difficult to actually measure the impact of the budgets on Nigerians especially. So I think going forward, this, like I said the other time, 2020 is going to be a good, robust fiscal year for Nigerians.
All right, thank you very much, Nia Kinsiju. Let's get back to Senator. All of this, looking at the time the President submitted to the National Assembly, of course, within a short time, all of this work was done. I'm sure it didn't come without its challenges.
Well, first of all, let me commend the President because the executive of government work day and night to make sure that they put the budget together. You could see from the voice of Mr. President when he submitted the budget in National Assembly, he was really, he worked seriously with his team. So, like my colleague in the House of Reps said, it's the political will is what is important. From beginning, even when the Senate President was campaigning, he made it clear to everyone in this country that, look, top of my agenda, if I'm elected, is to make sure that we return the budget cycle from January to December. Because it's key. It's key to the survival of the economy of this country. Because we have an economy dependent on government expenditure. And once you can't predict what happens to the national budget, then the whole economy will suffer. So the political will is very important. And the National Assembly, as I said, starting from the Senate President to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, to the entire membership of the National Assembly, key into this arrangement. And then we've gotten. So, because then there were people that were doubting that could that be possible. So, it's a pointer. This shows that whatever the entire leadership of the country agrees on to do in this country, once the political will is there, is doable. It has been done. And just like my friend Doctor said, the expert said, now the subnationals, they are now key into this arrangement. If you look at what is happening in the recent weeks, you could see that state, governments are now presenting their budgets. Even yesterday, I think Rivers did. So, yesterday or so. So, it's something that will continue. The effect will go down to the local government level. And it's good for the country. So, I also want them, the subnationals, and then to have political will. And it's going down, and we're happy that that is happening. So, it has been sacrificed from beginning, from the top to the bottom. And I hope this will continue. And not only in the area of budgeting in this country, in the entire system, we want the political will to be there to change things for the better. And once we agree that we are going to do it just like we've done now, it's doable. We can do it.
There was an addition to the budget. What was that?
Rhoda, I just before we get into the numbers, we understand that the line to Kano is clear. Okay. We'll introduce Professor Sheka, who is a professor of economics at Bayero University. See him there on the right side of the screen. Professor Sheka, let's have your opening comments, as it were, on the ceremony that took place yesterday, during which President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law the appropriation bill for 2020, effectively returning the budgetary cycle to January to December.
Thank you, Mr. Osato. Really, Nigerians are very happy with this development. As we know, a delay in government expenditure is equivalent to a delay in economic growth, because there is a very strong positive relationship between economic growth and government expenditure. Now, what we are having on ground now is portraying a good relationship between the executive arm of government and the National Assembly. And it is also portraying a very good and responsible leadership in the National Assembly. As we know, most of the reason or factors causing delays in budget were merely political and certain interests of individuals, especially the leadership of the National Assembly. But as for this, we now are seeing a very good relationship and responsible leadership. And then it also, I think it also shows some patriotism among the leadership, both the executive and the legislative arm of government. So we actually are happy that we can have a very good planning here. We can be able to ascertain the performance of the budget month by month, quarter by quarter, and we can be able to determine the GDP growth and all other economic indicators within the year. Budget starting from January and ending in December is actually something we have never seen in the past 1 decade. And well, sincerely, we are so happy that we are now back on track and following it as many other countries are actually practicing. We are so happy, and we hope the content of the budget will be implemented by the executive arm of government for the benefit of Nigerians.
Okay, Professor Sheka, thanks a lot. We'll come back to you later on in the course of the conversation. Let's come back to our guests in the Abuja studios. Honorable Benjamin Kalu, the Speaker of the House, as well as the President of the Senate, spoke on some issue that would appear to be of concern to them, and indeed to those who ask the question. And that is to say that there is a perception now, but it has a reputational implication, is one for you to clarify that, yes, the collaboration between the executive and the legislature has facilitated the passage of the 2020 appropriation. But from the clip that we saw a while ago, the House Speaker was saying, look, if this is construed as being a rubber stamp, well, it's for the benefit of Nigerians. So, how do you deal with this lingering or this crystallizing perception of the House, of the National Assembly, being a rubber stamp, since leaders of the two chambers have tended to address this in recent days?
Thank you very much. But I don't think he used the word rubber stamp. He just said many might criticize the relationship, and but who benefits at the end of the day? The Nigerians. You see, I've always been the advocate campaigning and pushing for the fact that we are not celebrated based on the level of acrimony we generate between the arms of government. I've always been the advocate for, though we are three arms of government, we are one government. This is not to say that the principle of separation of power should not be upheld in the work that we do for Nigerians. Checks and balances are there, and they're crystal clear in our Constitution. Section 88 and 89 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is very clear on what is expected of us on the executive. That we give them support does not mean that our eyes will be, closed, folded when it comes to oversight and function. This particular National Assembly is going to look at one of the enabling laws which has not been used so well, and it is the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007, which has in Section 30, Section 1 and Section 50 the mandate for the Minister of Finance through the Budget Office to monitor and report on the attainment of, the implementation, to assess the implementation on quarterly basis. It is in our law. And to report back to two arms. One, to the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, and to the National Assembly, the Joint Committee on Finance of the National Assembly, quarterly.
this was, used by Yar'Adua during his time, but we have been a bit quiet about that. The National Assembly is going to look into that to ensure that implementation of this budget beyond the Section 88-89, that we look at that Fiscal Responsibility Act to make sure that a report is given as at when due. What is the purpose of that report? The purpose of that report is to have an assessment. How far have we gone in fulfilling these things we have preached through the budget? How is it affecting people that we represent? Beyond that, the MDS also, periodically we are allowed, even beyond the Fiscal Responsibility Act, to demand for any data, any document, any evidence to show that they are complying with this particular bill that has become an act. So we are not going to be a rubber stamp. We are going to discharge the expectation of the principle of separation of power and checks and balances on the executive.
Thank you very much, Benjamin Kalu. Senator Barrow, let's get your take on that. Okay. I'm sure you're itching to speak
you see, from what happened yesterday, it shows that those who are saying so are just saying that for the sake of, human being, whatever you do, people are out there to complain. What we take as the most important is the national interest. What we are saying is a convergence of our views in terms of fulfilling our national interest, in terms of having a proper budgeting system in this country. That's what is happening. We all agree. We are all on the same page with the executive on these, serving the national interest. But sometimes there could be some differences. And you saw that when the president signed the budget, he said, we increased the budget by a certain amount of money, 263 billion naira, that is going to bring some environment and so on and so forth. It shows some differences there. They brought the revenue projections, and we saw that there are leakages here and there. And there were areas that were not captured in the revenue projections. And then we captured those areas and applied those monies in the critical areas that were not properly funded. But the president is looking at it in a different manner. If we're rubber stamp, we wouldn't capture those revenues. We'll leave it there. Yes. All right? But it shows that what those people are saying is not correct. And now he's going to bring... We don't agree, but we are going to sit down to see how we manage those differences. It's a clear difference. So what you are seeing here is the fact that we are putting, all of us are putting the national interest in the front burner. And that's why we have this convergence of views. Their view and our own is the same now, because we want to properly serve national interests.
All right. Thanks a lot, Senator Barrow. Let's return again to the issue. The federal budget isn't a document on its own. It must operate, as it were, for effectiveness with other documents. We have the finance bill, which is still an issue, and there are a number of critical issues therein. What, therefore, would be your recommendation with regard to what is required to be done so that the Appropriation Act isn't left high and dry without necessary support rampant, from the finance bill? That's one. Secondly, is also the advocacy for a national development plan. Yes, we have the ARGP, which will be exhausted by next year, but we have had the 2020 Appropriation Act now without a national development plan. What does this mean?
Thank you. I think the president in his speech made reference to that, though it was just in person. But I got it. He specifically talked about forwarding an organic budget bill to the National Assembly after this time. Now that's quite fundamental, because it talks to institutionalizing the budget cycle. Because once you have an organic budget bill, it tells you it gives you a permanent template of relationship between the assembly and the executive. So what it does is you don't need to wait for every year to know what you're going to do. You can actually plan over a period of time, because the Organic Budget Act, if it becomes an act, would have itemized the processes, the functions, the activities, the targets, and all that. of each budget cycle. Now, the executive can determine that we want to have a 4-year budget cycle, and this is how we want to break it. This is how we want to activate and also operationalize it in each fiscal year. So that for me is a very fundamental commitment by the president. And going forward, I hope as soon as possible that will get to the National Assembly. But again, I quickly also want to talk about this rubber stamp thing. I think we should go back to the originating power of the National Assembly. That's the sovereign. It's a Nigerian sovereign that had gifted the Nigerian public, the Nigerian political establishment, a majority of a particular party in the National Assembly. It does mean that the Nigerian sovereign, the Nigerian people, wants a majority of this party in government so that they will be able to do this on behalf of the Nigerian people. So it's not supposed, nobody should be talking of rubber stamping. It's a conscious act by the Nigerian people to have a majority of a particular party. If you have a majority of a particular party, it means there's consensus. There should be consensus naturally, from the activities and conduct of the National Assembly. We should not be expecting anything less. That is what the employers of the members of the National Assembly desire. Go there, talk with one voice, and do things correctly for us. And from the returns from the National Assembly leadership and the executive leadership, there's a general consensus to say we are doing things in the national interest. That's a consensus amongst the two. I mean, between the two, and of course, the Senate presidents basically talked about being loyal to the Nigerian people. That's the sovereign. And I think our elites should start understanding the fact of respecting the Nigerian people. I don't know if it's our last kid that said it or somebody. For all forms of government, rightful content. But what is best administered is best. The best is about the people, So what if the people have said, we want an APC majority in that National Assembly, and we want you to do things as fast as possible in the interest of the Nigerian people? That is the brief the Nigerian people had given the National Assembly, as it were.
Just to take this along. I mean, that's the point you've said is noted. Well, our experience also tells us that since from 1999 up until 2019, we saw a situation in the National Assembly in particular, because the State Houses of Assembly are a different kettle of consideration in this kind of relationship. We saw where the ruling party, it had a majority in the National Assembly, and yet the relationship often between the National Assembly and the executive was acrimonious. Kalu already talked about that you're not going to measure the efficiency of the Ninth National Assembly on the intensity of its acrimony with the executive branch. So people voted those who were in power, who were in the National Assembly in 1999, 2003, 2007, but you could see that they were often at daggers drawn at the executive branch, even though they were of the same political party.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add to what he said. Take, for instance, in the UK, because the people of the United Kingdom want Brexit to be implemented, decided to vote for the Conservative Party this time around, completely. Because they no longer want acrimony. This is their stance, go and do it, and so we are going to, elect the party that will do that for us. So, no acrimony. And that's what they've done. So, coming to that, let me say that it should be clear that national interest should be the front burner. And once that is agreed to by all those that are elected, and, going by what the people want, then of course, the people's view should be respected. And that's what we're doing. And let me emphasize again, even at that, there are little differences. I said that. The president, obviously yesterday, is not the same page. I mean, there's some little disagreement, and which was shown. So, but that can be sorted out. But I want to say that the views of Nigerian people should be taken seriously, and that's what we are doing.
All right, thank you very much. Now, let's go to our guest in Kanu. That's Professor Garba Ibrahim Sheka. Prof, the GDP growth rate projection in this budget is about 2.93%. Now, how does this relate to the inflation rate of 10.81%.
Well, actually, I have also seen the projection that the GDP growth rate had been projected to reach 2.8. Well, I think certainly the relationship is that the GDP growth, as we know, depends to a large extent in Nigeria on government expenditure. And we also expect more income to come to government, especially with the approval of the increase in VAT from 5% to 7.5%. We expect government to have more money to spend. And of course also with the expectation that government may likely secure approval from the National Assembly to obtain the loan of the 30 billion loan that we use in spending on the strategic infrastructure as government indicated. We expect that at the end of the day there may be some change in the GDP. Though we projected GDP growth of 7% by next year at the end of the economic recovery and growth plan, but from the look of things, we believe that target may not be hit. But this target of GDP being less than 3% as predicted in the budget may be realistic. And not only realistic, but it can be also a source of sustainability if it is reached. But it depends on how well the budget is implemented and how well the inflation is controlled. If we allow inflation to go beyond the projection, then certainly any other thing can happen and the GDP growth expectation may not be reached. So it depends on how tight the government is, how serious the government is with regards to the implementation. There are a number of things that we are so skeptical in this budget, especially the revenue generation, the core revenue generation, that is the revenue expected to be generated within the economy. That depends on oil price projection as well as oil production. The projection was 2.18 million barrels per day, and the convention around the overall budget only take that to the National Assembly is how do we accept a projection of 2.18 million barrels per day while our third quarter is just 1.77? Are we going to violate our third quarter? Or is there any way that we can do? Or are we producing more that we cannot sell? So if all these issues are resolved, then I believe the GDP projection can be achieved and the inflation tracking can also be achieved. But certainly there are a lot of things that must be considered and must be taken very serious if we want these targets to be achieved.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Shekhar. Now, I'd like Ani Akinseju, who is also an economic expert, to also speak to this.
Well, I am very sanguine, about the figures. It's even a moderation from the 2019 projection. We've reduced, I think 2019 GDP projection was about 3.1% or something. Now it has been reduced to 2.96. The realization of it would be obvious when you also look at the trend of what we have now in 2019. That's why the shortcomings and all that. Q3 has gone to 2.28%. Q1 was 2.01 or something, and Q2 was 2.24. Now already that's a threshold. So if you are doing 2.96 at the end of 2020, it's from what we have in 2019, despite the shortcomings and limitations, even in the fiscal documents that we have and the implementation. I believe that we should be able to do more than 2.96. And why am I saying that? I'm also taking it together with other documents Kingsley talked about, the finance bill, the Procurement Act that I think has also been amended, that particularly is also fundamental, because if mobilization fee for contractors used to be 15%, and at the threshold had been increased to 30%. Now, what that tells you is that there's going to be a lot of reduction in pressure, on the contractor. The average contractor would not likely approach a bank to fund his takeoff. And when you do, when that is achieved, it's the end result is more fund in the hands of the contractor, is able to employ more people at takeoff. And when a contractor is able to employ more people, one, it takes more people off the unemployment community, as it were, and also increase productivity. And productivity, of course, is the basis of GDP measurement. So when you also now add that to part of the Procurement Act, I also now see from my reading that all contract considerations should be concluded within 3 weeks. That is different to the 3 months we are experiencing now. That's also a huge timeline we are talking about. It talks to movement to site as fast as possible, delivery as fast as possible, and it has impact on the bottom line, both for the company, and for the Nigerian nation. And we also have the finance bill, a suite of 7 bills, and most importantly, people talk about the VAT, but I look at the rebates for the SMEs, companies that with turnover less than 25 million have been exempted. This should be celebrated everywhere in Nigeria. People should be dancing. You have about 32 million registered SMEs in Nigeria. It means that 32 million companies have been exempted from paying tax. That translates to mean that you have more retained earnings. The companies that have run their businesses at that threshold would be retaining their earnings and will be reinvesting. And of course, that will be expanding business. Companies, medium-level companies between 25 million and 100 million had also been reduced from the nominal 30% income tax to 20%, saving 10 million, 10%. That again is translated to retained earnings. Even if it's not retained earnings, it translates to consumption. So if you are not reinvesting in your company, you are spending, in the marketplace, and that is also expanding the GDP base, as it were.
Thank you very much, Ani Akinshiju. Of course, in the course of this conversation, we'll be looking at key areas of this budget implementation, of course, how it translates to the average Nigerian on the street. But just before we do that, we're already having tweets coming in from our viewers via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. So if you have questions for our guests, you have suggestions, you have comments, just tweet at us at our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. But first, let's take the ones that we have here. This one is from Titus Monday Knock. He says, hope this budget would serve the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians, especially the youths, as regards employment opportunities and also addressing the epileptic energy deficit and security challenges facing the nation. We hope some corrupt government officials wouldn't have a field day.
Amogbala Humbabs tweets, now that we have a budget cycle of January to December, it allows for proper planning. Investors can plan based on this too, and the presidency must monitor funds disbursement to ensure that targeted projects are executed. Not enough to sign a budget though, implementation is germane.
And Mike Anyaku says, congratulations, National Assembly, prompt passage of the 2020 budget. Congratulations to the President for the timely signing. And of course, congratulations to all Nigerians. This has clearly shown that the year 2020 is our year of prosperity, the year, of course, of going really fast, of fast-track development in all areas.
Jack Solomon tweets, we commend the executive and legislative arms for the speedy passage of the 2020 appropriation bill into law. We hope that both arms will continue to work together as colleagues to ensure that the budget is fully implemented.
And the next one is from Undwe Dim. It says, it's commendable to maintain a cycle budget. This clearly shows cordiality between the executive and the legislature.
Law Fasi, although Nigerians would describe the signing of the budget this year as a rubber stamp of the National Assembly, but of the executive, the cordial relationship is healthy for our democracy and economic development.
Ne Ibe Isaac Ibokte says, I pray God that God would help our leaders to implement this one judiciously.
Awal Ibrahim, signing the budget is not a problem, but we must urge the government to ensure that whatever they plan in the budget be implemented within the time frame.
And this one is from Steve Bond 007, who said the stipulated demand for the renovation of the National Assembly is just too huge. Of course, will the borrowed money be used in servicing the cost of governance?
Festus Akimboyewa, kudos to the legislator and the executive for the timely passage of the 2020 appropriation bill. We now want to see a substantial upgrade in the health of our public finances so that the budget can create a stronger and fairer economy.
This one is from Ibrahim Modu Aji. He says, we hope to see that the budget is fully implemented and we hope to see at least 90% of implementation. Let all critical people-centered projects be implemented. Full fulfillment of the campaign promises that starts with the budget implementation.
Otulo Sunday, short and sharp, says implementation is key.
And this one is from Innocent Yawal James. It says the budget should reflect visible projects aimed at creating jobs to better the lives of Nigerians. Enough of having huge figures without Nigerians benefiting.
Mutana Farouk, I'm optimistic about the implementation of the budget because it appears to be going as planned, and I pray that it all ends well for the betterment of Nigerians.
And Festus Akimboyewa says, with the passage of the signing of the 2020 budget into the next stage is implementation. Since the federal government can only spend the revenue it generates, it should focus on revenue generation and tactful in the implementation of the budget. I pray we're able to achieve 80% performance of this budget.
Sonny Michael Amakoji, the publicity we give to budget presentation is not the same that is given to budget evaluation. If I may ask, can the panelists Nigerians the budget performance of 2018 and the outgoing year 2019? Again, why is it that our overhead costs always does more than our current expenditure? Overhead cost is part of current expenditure.
And this one is from Ahmed Ibrahim. He says, of course, a remarkable one from the distinguished Senator Barrow. He says that what you and the entire leaders of the National Assembly did in the quick passage of the 2020 budgets must be highlighted and applauded.
Kabiru Ishiaku, we need proper implementation of this budget. So those are the tweets that we are taking in the meantime. I would like to return to the Senator and Honorable Member with regard to the, if we like, we can loosely refer to it now as the complementary bill, which is a finance bill. Some of it Niyi has already picked out. You know, I raised this at the beginning of this conversation. The issue of VAT is in there. Reform of public procurement is also in there. We know that there had been issues. The Minister of Works and Housing had complained, on several occasions as to how procurement was a major hindrance to the execution of projects under this ministry. What is the status of the finance bill? What do we know in terms of the highlights? We know that, of course, VAT has been increased from 5% to 7.5%. But what else, are there in the finance bill? And in particular, what is the status so that it can run pari passu with the appropriation act?
Well, I think the doctor has said it, but let me say one thing. I give kudos to the executive government because it's one thing to have a budget, but the most important is to garner the revenue needed to fund that budget. And that's what the executive has done by bringing forward a finance bill to facilitate, getting this necessary to fund the budget. And this is fine. This is very good. And it, created a way in the bill to make sure that the critical section or sector of our business enterprises are given the necessary support to help to really make the economy, up and running, like the micro, small, and medium scale enterprises. The rebate given to them through VAT arrangement is something that is welcome. In the whole, it's a fantastic arrangement because it gives us now the trajectory of creating the trajectory of getting the necessary fund to fund the the budget. And again, the National Assembly also is able to do well because they are working on the same page. I told you, what we are putting from border is national interest. Make sure that everything works. Now, we decided on our own to bring the amendment forward, the amendment of Public Procurement Act. So that, yes, we've gotten the budget. Now, how do you implement? So we've seen lapses in the public procurement arrangement. The money is there, yeah, we've gotten the money, but the procurement process becomes a problem. Then we said, look, we cannot begin to implement this budget until we fix those problems. And that's why we have the public procurement had been brought for amendment, and we have finished with that. Now, I think the House, I think maybe the House has done it, then it will be sent to the President for his assent. So we've created an enable environment to kickstart the operation of the national budget from January. Not only, getting the budget ready, but all those areas that will give the space, that will allow for the implementation of the budget to be given the space to make sure that the budget works properly. So that's what we have in the finance bill, and that's what we have in the public procurement amendment bill. So this is a fantastic arrangement.
Honorable Carlo, what's the position with regard to relevant aspects of the finance bill with the House of Reps?
Yeah, just like the distinguished senator said, it's a wonderful arrangement. I actually commend both the finance committee and the appropriation committee, and as well as the executive. I must say that. Before going into details, there was something you were saying about when you mentioned, though we have majority in the House and still we did not, those houses did not push the agenda forward as we are pushing it now. What I want to point out there is that there is a good communication. There's a good communication between the executive and the legislative arm. You might be in the same family and you don't communicate well. If you don't communicate well, you will not be able to drive the agenda of the family. So what is happening in the present dispensation is that the president is communicating well what his agenda is, what his vision is. And when you see a good vision, you run with it. So this is what is happening here. And there is this commitment from the executive to change the narratives. And we are buying into it totally, except where there is need for us to raise one or two things. Like it was mentioned about the finance bill. There's another thing they added in the finance bill, which is, that agric processing, which before now enjoyed about 5 years tax holiday, have increased to 10 years. So they have enough time, but you must be not only production, but processing, because the idea is to encourage secondary, production, where we do add value to what we produce, we process, because the government is looking at alternative source of income beyond oil and gas. And if you look at this budget, there is a remarkable shift from total dependence on oil revenue to an alternative, which is agriculture. And in order to encourage that industry, this government is giving incentives that will help other alternative sources of income. Like he was saying, arrangements are made for the financing of this particular budget. If we increase our non-oil export revenue, for example, the revenue will add to what will be used in getting what we want to achieve for the nation. So there is communication between the executive and the legislative arm, and Nigerians have started enjoying it through these, setting goals, achieving goals, and I'm sure it is going to continue like that if the executive sustain this communication that they are carry on with at the moment.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to Secretary Barrow to speak to two questions that were asked by our viewers on via Twitter handle. Well, this is a budget that has been tagged a budget of sustaining growth and job creation. And there were two questions from Innocent Yawal James and Utolo Sunday as to how this budget reflects job creation for Nigerian youths.
Well, it has been stated clearly by my colleague from the House of Reps. There's this attempt, and it's succeeding, to move from dependence on oil revenue to non-oil revenue. That is diversifying the economy, strengthening our agricultural arrangement, strengthening our solid mineral, exploitation arrangement. These are areas that will provide more jobs, will strengthen the economy, all right, and the economy will be up and doing. And once it is up and doing, jobs will be available, and taxes will be will accrue to the government. Will have more funds, and those funds will be channeled to our social services areas where schools will benefit, where hospitals will benefit, and so on and so forth. So it's a new arrangement that will benefit the entire country. So it's a fine arrangement.
Let's get you.
Talking to diversification, I want to relate with the recent report by the NBS on merchandise trading. Of course, the history, the bulk of our exports is usually oil. Well, the significant figure for 2018 has it that the bulk of exports from Nigeria, to the West African countries to the world, was actually recorded to Ghana. That's the non-oil export to Ghana. From what? From floating storage and production platforms. And that it touches me because we're talking of about 900 billion naira value of exports from Nigeria from floating production production platforms. Where did that come from? I am very sure it came from our experiment with Total Hygiena floating production, which was done in Nigeria mostly through local content policy. So it would translate to mean that even beyond our agriculture, beyond our normal manufacturing runs, we are now becoming a major reference point, in producing floating platforms. Don't forget that Ghana is now just registering itself as an oil producing country, and Big Brother Nigeria has become a supplier. So if we have not encouraged the local content policy, we wouldn't have built this capacity. It is this capacity that we have built now that has also helped diversify the economy. So if in a particular quarter we are able to record 900 and something billion coming from Ghana, it shows capacity. It shows potentials being unlocked, and I think going forward we would be able to get money to fund this revenue, to fund these projects.
All right. To add to job, how does it generate jobs, like she asked? Remember when the economist was analyzing, he mentioned the VAT that is going to 32 million SMEs. They are free from VAT. They are exempted from it. So which means more money in their hand. And the latest report of SMEDA says that the job creation, the SMEs are the engine room of any nation. And they generate about 80 to 90% of all the employment in the country, as well as generate 80 to 90% of businesses, not the big giants. You find out that if this budget supports SMEs, 32 million SMEs, and they generate 80 to 90% of employment, you can imagine the amount of job that will be created. That is the point I wanted to mention, that this budget is employment friendly.
Honorable Carlo, and indeed the other guests, there are matters again arising from what you have said. I think Neil was with us on Good Morning Nigeria when we first discussed this threshold that exempted SMEs from VAT payments. You had business, if your turnover was sub 25 million naira. There are a number, I don't quite understand how it's going to function. I will come back to that. And we talk about jobs. Neil was talking about the platforms that have been constructed on the basis of local content and indeed other activities. Part of what I find challenging in our environment is we don't appear to be getting quarterly figures or half-yearly or even yearly figures as to the number of jobs being created, whether in the construction industry, whether in agriculture, or other. People can speak sometimes glibly that we have employed so many millions of people, but where are the numbers coming from? We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
My name is Yemi Adetunji, the COO downstream of NNPC. Ever since the closure of the borders, we have seen a marked reduction of about 10% in terms of the evacuation of what you call loadouts of PMS, which equates to about 6 million liters per day, essentially because of the border closure, because of certain aspects we've also done as NNPC, working with our sister organizations, sister agencies, Nigerian Customs, DPR, Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources, and other agencies, and also what we call Operation White, which is an intervention we have put in place to trace and track every molecule of petroleum products as they arrive in country, through the vessels, as they move through the depots, as they evacuated trucks at the depots.
I don't comot my hand from oil bunkering. General, what you gonna do? What did they answer? I don't understand though. Because they spoil our water and our environment and cause our people serious harm. Militants is there. You know good. Me, I'm not doing against Sam. Because why? Change begins with me. General Tombu!
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back. Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Let's return to Professor Sheka, who is with us from our Kano Network Center. Professor Sheka, I'm sure you've had the benefit of listening to the contributions of the other guests here with us in the Abuja studios with regard to, shall we say, the supplementary legislation which is still in the works, namely the finance bill and issues arising therefrom, VAT amendment to the Public Procurement Act, and other relevant issues. Now, what's your comment on this? Because when there was a proposal earlier to ramp up the VAT percentage from 5 to 7.5%, there were complaints that this is likely to have an inflationary pressure. And here we are, where the budget for 2020 is predicated on 10.81. Latest figures from Bureau of Statistics already indicate a 1.0 percentage increase on budgetary pressure. And here we are again. What is likely to play out if we have VAT increased from 5% to 7.5% in 2020, and in the meantime the federal government gets only 15% of all the receipts from VAT?
Well, all right. Well, I think if you talk of increase the VAT, even when the argument was, the proposal was brought, we argued that this tax is a direct tax. Payers of those taxes are not actually, they don't feel the pinch because they pay indirectly. Unless if, like other people are saying, it's looking like a sales tax that the sellers are the ones that are paying, and they likely increase the price. But certainly, to me, the increase in VAT is okay if the bill is accepted and is implemented we expect to see a rise in revenue from that sector because it's a very, it's contributing a lot to the government's revenue. So to me, I don't see VAT, causing inflation in the short run, and even in the long run, if properly done, especially as so many goods have been exempted, especially those that affect the common people in most cases. So I think it's a very good policy, and I think it will be okay. Again, if you permit me to comment on the issue of the relationship between the budget and employment generation, certainly what the Right Honorable Senator mentioned, I think those are long-run issues. Basing or rather exempting our small and medium-scale enterprises from paying taxes is also a good policy. But I think there are more things to do with that, because prices of Nigerian commodities in the world market are not competitive, especially because of the infrastructure problem that we have in the country. Most of the prices are higher, and so we may not have a place in the international market, especially if you consider our agricultural produce like the rice we produce in Nigeria, which is very expensive. I think the most important thing is for the government to ensure the provision of infrastructure within a short period of time. And like we also have commented, certainly this bill has not been accented yet. It may probably, as the Right Honorable Senator said, it has been by them, they have passed it, it's waiting potential ascension. I think if the bill is accepted, it will take some time. It may not certainly or really complement this year's budget, because it may take time to prepare for the implementation of the content, especially those issues that affect the small and medium enterprises. But it's a very laudable bill that will certainly make put the economy upward. So really, the employment and this year's budget, unless something is done serious, I don't see how this year's budget is connected to immediate employment issues in this country. Maybe in the medium run, but in the short run, I think a lot needs to be done.
Thank you very much, Garba Ibrahim Sheka, a professor of economics from Bayero University, Kano. It's on this note we want to say thank you for joining us on the program this morning. All right, gentlemen, let's continue from here very quickly. Just before we take our next set of tweets, let's speak to the issue of implementation. How the question on, of course, some of the tweets that we've gotten earlier has been, how do we ensure that this budget is properly implemented, that at least we get 80 to 90% of implementation?
Well, I think all is now set to get that done. The amendment to the public procurement, because in the procurement process, the extant procurement process we have, also constitute an impediment to the implementation of the budget. And also the finance bills that are now being processed, that are waiting, are going to be taken to Mr. President for assent. Once that is done, also necessary money will be garnered to have a smooth ride process where monies will be made available. And of course, the crude oil price is doing well. Crude oil is doing well in the international market. We predicated a barrel at $57, and now is about $60-something. So all is said, everything is good, and the political will is there. And as said by my colleague, we are also going to be on the toes. Put the revenues to begin with. The revenue and agencies on their toes. We're going to put pressure on them. We're going to, strengthen our oversight instruments to make sure that they perform. They do well in actualizing the revenue target for each agency. And apart from that, we are also going to make sure that we oversight properly. And not only because he was talking about the Constitution is embedded in the Constitution that we have the latitude to oversight, to check whatever any agency or even individual that has been given government's money in the budget, we have the the constitutional purview, the constitutional latitude to make sure that such monies are being well spent. So we are going to employ all these instruments, the instrumentality of the law, the procedure, everything, to make sure that we create a different time around. It's going to be work around the clock, just the way we did from the beginning, because there's a convergence of of interest to bring the national interest of front burner to change it so that our youth down there will have jobs. And if you don't do, I said earlier that this is a country and an economy that's dependent on government expenditure. And once you don't get it right, then everything suffers. So we are going to do well. We are going to make sure that everything is done. All the arrangements have been set. As I said, we are now set to go.
Well, we're good to go, but still there's a clear recognition that there is a linkage between the 2020 Appropriation Act as it is now and the finance bill. I asked the question earlier what the status is. I didn't quite get the response, from the two lawmakers who are here. But still, arising from that, I just want to ask, yes, the executive obviously had good intentions in coming with this suite of bills that it labeled finance bill. But to the extent that it's omnibus and it's just a single bill, if one fails, if any aspect of it fails, the likelihood is that the entire bill might fail. And we saw this in the past when attempts to amend it, say the Constitution, where you had a raft of amendments, different aspects.
Like he said,
our last set of tweets. This one is from BBJ. He says, thank you, Mr. President. Things will be better in 2020. The economy will stand tall. Thank you very much.
Adeniran Idris says, signing of the budget by the president is okay, but most priority now should be how to generate revenue to fund the budget. Proper monitoring and implementation is also very crucial, along with accountability for the last couple.
And finally, Abubakar Umar Fraser says, call them rubber or iron stamp, history is made. Nigeria is heading in a positive direction. All right, those are the tweets that we have, and it's on this note we want to say a very big thank you to all of our guests who've joined us this morning on the program. First of all, I'd like to thank Nia Kinsuju, who is an economic and investment analyst and a regular on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks so much.
It's good to have you once again. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much.
I also want to say a very big thank you to our guests once again that joined us from Kano, Gariba Ibrahim Sheka, Professor of Economics from Bayero University. We thank you so much for joining us. Also, a very big thank you to Honorable Benjamin Kali, who's a spokesperson of the House of Representatives and also a member representing Bende Federal Constituency. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, Senator Jabri Barau, he is a chairman, Senate Committee on Appropriation. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your thoughts and time.
Pleasure.
All right, sports.